Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a drink, it is time for some Path of Exile discussion. Arguably the most important Reddit post of the entire league, and probably the entire year for Path of Exile players, has come out today, just a few hours ago. This is the 3.25 updated guide to Recombinators. I'm going to put a link to this post down in the description below. It's really worth a look. It's something that is very similar to the 3.18 Recombinator guide that was put together by Iron vs Wild, and some of the people who were involved in writing that with Iron have now taken over and written the 3.25 version. One of the key things is that whilst Recombinators haven't changed a huge amount since they were in 3.18, they have changed in important ways, and a lot of the things that we did to optimize their effects in 3.18 no longer apply in 3.25. Likewise, there are new tips and tricks that work because of some of the nuances of some of these changes, especially when we get to talking about the use of Multimod as a crafting tool in Recombinator inputs. One of the things you'll see here is that a lot of the ways that people are crafting really good items with Recombinators, they're being done making extensive use of Multimod as a crafting input into the items that are being produced. All the research that's gone on in this has again come from the Prohibited library, a group of players that try to pick apart at aspects of the game, work out how it ticks, and then work out ways to optimize that ticking. I won't put a link to the Prohibited Library Discord just because it's not my baby to invite you to, but if you are interested in getting involved there, it's not very hard to find. Just jump over to the Path of Exile wiki, poewiki.net, and look around for information on the Prohibited Library Discord there. You won't have trouble finding it, and a lot of the people who update the wiki are also heavily involved in the Prohibited Library Discord. So I'm not going to assume that people know the way that Recombinators worked in 3.18 in detail. It has changed a bit, but essentially the most important thing you needed to know about Recombinators back in 3.18 was that they worked out the prefixes separately entirely from the suffixes. That mostly still holds in 3.25 with one very important caveat. And that very important caveat is that there is a new category of mods that are being called exclusive modifiers in Butsicles Writeup over on Reddit. What these exclusive modifiers are is modifiers that once you've got one of them onto an item through a Recombinator, you can't get any more exclusive modifiers through Recombinators. The most important thing to know about these exclusive modifiers is that the overwhelming majority of crafted modifiers are counted as exclusive mods. There are some exceptions that have been found, and they're probably unintended. This hard ban on any exclusive modifiers rolling once the first modifier that's exclusive is on the item is something that is extremely exploitable, especially when you want to try and build up 3 perfect prefixes on the same item. But even when you want to just build up 2 perfect prefixes on an item, it's really good then as well. What you want to do is engineer a situation where you're guaranteed to have at least 2 and probably 3 prefixes on your final product, and then the pool of prefixes that can roll are a whole bunch of exclusive modifiers and also the modifiers that you're trying to get together on the item. And then in the suffix pool, there's a whole bunch of exclusive modifiers as well, as the absolute maximum number of exclusive suffixes that you can get. If any of the exclusive suffixes are picked, and if you also get by RNG that you've got 3 prefixes on your final item, then suddenly you're in a situation where the game is trying to force 3 prefixes on the item that you're producing, but the only 3 prefixes that are valid choices are ones that are very precious and very powerful, and things that would not normally roll together on an item under almost any circumstances. That's the key to the way that Recombinators work, and it's why Multimod and beast crafting aspects is going to be such a key point of Butsicles' guide. It's not really just Multimod, there's a few other nuances as well, but Multimod is the main one. So, a recap of the things that haven't changed. When you apply a Recombinator, there's a coin flip as to which base is kept. 50-50, it'll keep the base on the left, 50-50, it'll keep the base on the right. It will remember all of the permanent modifications that have been made to that item, so things like its link status, things like its quality, including special levels of quality like 29% or 30%, and the actual item type itself, as well as whether it's corrupted, and if it's corrupted, what its Val implicits are, enchantments, other special implicits like Searing Exarch ones, all that sort of good stuff. Now, there are 2 important exceptions to this rule though. One of them is that the Sacred Orb roll on the final product is going to be re-randomized. It is not going to be dependent on any of the input items that are used. And the second important one is that the item level is determined by a formula. It is often the higher of the 2 input items, but that's only the case if they're within 4 of each other. If they're separated by more than 4, then there's a formula involved, but basically it's the average plus 2 in that situation. So they're the 2 exceptions. Otherwise, it's basically all of the same permanent item modifications that apply to one of the input items chosen at random. All of that is exactly the same as it was in patch 3.18 Sentinel League. Now, in the actual write-up itself, a notation is defined. I'm not really going to use this notation here because we're not going to go into as much depth as the original post does, but I do recommend having a look at this and then perhaps using that if you're going to be communicating your particular crafts to other players, because it will make things a little bit easier. The biggest breakthrough in understanding the way Recombinators work now was cracking Grinding Gear Games' exclusive modifier group. Now, what exclusive means in this case is, like we were saying before, only one of these modifiers can end up on the finished product if it is a product of a recombination. This is a complete and utter change from the way that Recombinators worked in patch 3.18 and Sentinel League. In patch 3.18, you could get with relative ease, and when I say relative ease, I mean like 6 or 8 Recombinators, 6 or 8 bases that you're using, you could get a set of gloves that had all 3 of the Incursion Temple modifiers that provide 46 to 48 to 1 elemental resistance, and that provide some sort of bonus to damage when you're striking an enemy that's affected by a certain ailment. These mods were really good, and getting all 3 of them together was incredibly powerful. These modifiers are now considered exclusive. Once the Recombinator base rolls one of these mods, it is no longer allowed to roll any other ones. This at first will seem like a massive nerf to the way Recombinators used to work. In many ways it is intended as a nerf, but it does also provide a number of tricks that you can use, where you can take items that have a lot of these exclusive modifiers and then use them in order to very tightly control what goes onto the final product. Here's a list of known exclusive modifiers, and this is probably not yet a completely definitive list. Modifiers that are Grasping Mail exclusive. For example, your character's entire armor score is boosted by your overcapped fire resistance. All of the Incursion exclusive modifiers, for example, the Takati's weapon mod, which is tier 2 physical damage % with some hybrid physical damage added as extra chaos as one mod. This is something that is an exclusive modifier. Modifiers that are named of the essence. So this is most modifiers that are provided by essences, but some essence modifiers are a little bit different. For example, a Deafening Essence of Envy does not provide of the essence as its suffix. It instead just provides tier 1 chaos resistance from the normal mod pool. So that's not considered an essence mod, but a lot of the other mods that are provided by essences are. Most modifiers that are crafted are considered to be exclusive, but it is not absolutely everything. The only crafted prefix modifier that is known not to be exclusive is Benchcrafted Life, but I'm not going to rule out there could be more. And then for the suffixes, there's a bunch that are all over the place. However, you cannot go wrong if the crafted suffix or prefix is tied to the syndicate. So for instance, Torah's prefix on weapons, or Chosen prefix on weapons, which is something that's come as a veiled craft originally, or of the Order, or of Gravicius. All of these are going to be safe. If it's got a name like that, then it's safe to use. If it doesn't have a name, then it may not be safe. All metamods, including the very important, can have up to 3 crafted modifiers, and also beast aspects are also in this category of exclusive modifiers. A bunch of other things are still being tested, things like the Delve flammability on hit on rings. This is something that's still being investigated at the moment. So for the moment, that's just simply not known. Likewise, veiled modifiers. 2 things that are very important to know though. Fractured and influence modifiers, these are not considered to be exclusive modifiers. A lot of the rest of this document is talking about ways and giving some case studies where you can then use this information to rig the odds in your favor. If you don't use this information to rig the odds in your favor, then the odds can be quite bad. The next category that needs to be talked about are what are being termed non-native natural modifiers by Butsicles. This is something that's still being worked on at the moment. These are things that can roll on items, but that can't necessarily roll on every type of item. Really good example here is spell suppression. If you've got a set of gloves that have a dexterity requirement of 0, then they cannot get spell suppression as a roll on them. However, you can transfer that across through the use of the Recombinator. You can get it from a dexterity set of gloves that can roll it onto your other base, and then it becomes a non-native natural modifier. It's from the natural mod pool, but it's not native to the item that it's on. Other good examples here, physical damage reduction on a pure intelligence chest, because that's something that you can only get on strength bases, or the hybrid energy shield and armor rolls that are something that you can roll on an Archon kite shield, but that you could not roll on a titanium spirit shield, which is a purely intelligence base, because it doesn't have any armor to scale up. Now the new recombination rule set as it's understood works like this. Firstly, you have a 50-50 choice as to which base is selected. The next step, the number of prefixes and suffixes on the final item is worked out. Now this is a formula based upon the number of prefixes on each of the input items. Those get added together. So if you've got 3 prefixes on your left input item and 2 on your right input item, then that's a total of 5. That's then put into a formula that Grinding Gear Games know for certain and that we've been able to make reasonable estimates of, and you'll find them a little bit later in this video. That then determines whether the output item that you get has 2 prefixes, 3 prefixes, or something else. The suffixes get worked out exactly the same way. Now, what we're going to be doing in terms of optimization is trying to control it in such a way that a whole bunch of prefixes that could roll end up being banned. So you put 6 input prefixes in, 3 on the left item, 3 on the right item, but you try to ban as many of them as possible from the resulting item. That's going to be where all of the strategy is and all of the optimization. That's where all the non-native natural modifiers come into play, and also the exclusive modifiers. And so adding these onto your item, for example, through the use of Multimod and then bloating the item up with a whole bunch of extra mods, doing this is something that then adds a considerable improvement to your chances of hitting exactly what you're looking for. Now in the third step, we've locked in the number of modifiers the game is going to try to put on the item, both prefixes and suffixes. At this point, the game actually does start applying them. And this is where those exclusive modifiers become really important. Once one of them is picked, all of the rest of them become banned. This is something where if you explore a lot, you'll be able to find ways to really rig this in your favor, but it's going to take a deep knowledge of a whole number of different crafting systems to do this optimally. Now, the fourth part of the rule set is a position you don't want to find yourself in. This is a situation where the game is trying to choose which 3 out of 5 prefixes to put on your final item because you haven't blocked things, or maybe you're trying to fit 1 out of 3 input prefixes. In this situation, there is some sort of biasing that's used and we don't know how this works. Really, you want to be in a situation where this step doesn't occur because you've rigged the odds in your favor so much through the use of non-native natural modifiers and also through the use of potentially influence mods and exclusive mods that you can't get to this spot. Fun fact, you might have remembered that during week 1 or maybe it was week 2 of the league, Grinding Gear Games put out a number of buffs to Recombination, after which people immediately started saying this has gone from dumpster tier to really good. Well, these changes only apply to this step. The strategy that's outlined by Butsicles in this write-up, actually every single piece of this worked pre-buff as well. It's just that this now makes it so that if you make a mistake, if you poorly use your Recombinators and you wind up actually experiencing part 5.4 of this write-up, then in that situation, those buffs improve the results. However, you don't want to be in that situation. You want to be in a spot where the game is not choosing between 2 mods and all of this biasing that was improved back then is important. You want to be in a situation where it's choosing 1 mod out of 1 valid mod. All of the biggest, most successful crafts that people are doing at the moment using Recombinators are trying to bypass this step and not finding themselves in a situation where step 4 matters. Step 5 talks about mod doubling, which is what happens when you have 2 copies of the same mod on your 2 input items. And generally speaking, this is a positive thing. So for instance, if you're trying to get perfect suffixes on an item, you might find that benchcrafting 17% fire resist on both items will actually increase your odds of getting the desired set of suffixes in the final product. And then there's a couple of other important corner cases to deal with. For example, what happens if you've got a tier 1 attribute suffix and you're trying to recombinate onto an item where the final product is a low item level. In that case, you will be able to transfer across this high level modifier and it will be able to be part of that final product. So the team that have been doing this have tabulated the results that they've found as to just how many mods come onto the final item. So up the top is the total number of prefixes that are found across your 2 items combined. And down the left-hand side is a table of the percentages of the total number of modifiers on the final product in that class. For example, if your input items have a total of 4 prefixes between them, then about 11% of the time you'll get 1 prefix, about 59% of the time you'll get 2 prefixes, and about 31% of the time you'll get 3 prefixes. Very important to note here that if you can get up to 6 prefixes, then you have a very good chance of getting 3 prefixes on the final product. And that's one of the key reasons that Multimod is such a powerful crafting tool when it comes to Recombinators now, because it allows you to fill up these extra slots with mods that are going to be exclusive to each other, and then use this in order to get all of the benefits of having lots and lots of mods on your item, but also not having the drawback of potentially winding up with an item with a whole bunch of bench crafted prefixes you don't want on it. Instead, you can just get a small number of those modifiers instead. There's one exception that's coming up a fair bit here, and this is where one item that's an input item has 1 prefix and no suffixes, and the second item has 0 prefixes and 1 suffix. In this case, they have not yet got any video proof of anyone getting a scoured item out of that. So it may be that there's some additional bias against getting a completely scoured output, and that comes up in this particular situation. Section 6 of the document outlines strategies that you can use in order to get one modifier that is from a specific base type that might be pretty obscure and pretty valuable, like a grasping mail, and transfer it onto something that it can be more powerful on, such as a royal plate. There's a whole lot of it right up in here, and it's quite cunning, and it takes advantage of a lot of the strategies we've talked about before. One of the key things you want to do here is maximize the number of non-native natural modifiers possible, and do this in such a way that you guarantee there must be at least one prefix on the resulting item, and if that item is the royal plate, then the only valid option for it is going to be the grasping mail exclusive modifier that you wanted. Very cunning strategy, and it's one that's worth reading in detail because there's a lot of things that you can learn from that and then apply to your own crafts. And then in section 7, all of the details of how to use Multimod are detailed in depth. This is something that I will definitely have to make a new video on at some point once I've gotten my head around actually doing it in practice a few times. But this is extremely, extremely good if you want to combine 3 perfect prefixes on an item, and those prefixes are rare. For example, let's say that you wanted to get the runic modifier, which is tier 1 spell damage, the magister's modifier, which is +1 to all spell skills, and a modifier like lithomancer's, +1 to all physical spell skills, onto the same ultimate wand. This is the way that you will do this, and it's very different to how you would have done it during Sentinel, but it's also a very cunning and clever strategy. It will use several multimods at a cost of 2 divine orbs per one, but this is something that's very affordable compared to any other way that you would craft such a ridiculously powerful endgame wand. Anyways, that is the discoveries that have been made when it comes to Recombinators in 3.25. These have pretty much all been worked out now, and from this point on, it's going to be exploring exactly how you can optimize in order to craft to the current meta. I'm going to leave it there. May your Val Orbs have interesting results.